Hello and welcome to my talk on speeding up PreStage packages. So my name is James Smith and I'm the audio engineer and occasional co-host for the MacAdmins podcast. In my day job, I'm an engineer at ANZ, one of Australia's largest banks, and I'm also responsible for the management of our fleet of around 2,000 devices. So in today's session, what I'm going to be taking you through is how we deploy our enrollment package. And from here on out, I'm going to refer to it as a PreStage package, as that's just what's used in Jamf. And really ensuring how you can give users the smoothest enrollment experience. So we're going to go over three main topics, and that's the default state that you generally have when you enroll devices with automated device enrollment, the desired state of where we actually want to get to and how I'm doing it, and then the implementation, how we got there. So starting off, in most cases, we're going to start off with the default state. And in most cases, once the enrollment has completed and the user has progressed through the setup assistant, they'll be dropped to the desktop. Now at this point, you have to hope that they don't start messing with things before your splash screen comes up. And in my case, that's depnotify when that loads. Sometimes it can take a while for the MDM to get the agent on the machine, get things installed, and actually get your enrollment policy running. The wait time can be anywhere from a few seconds, even to a few minutes. So that's what enrollment usually looks like. It's not the best, it's not the worst, but we don't want our users messing with things until the device is fully set up. So now let's look at the desired state. And we're going to start as things normally do with the setup system. We're just going to progress through here. Once they've put in the Wi-Fi password, they're going to sign in with their work credentials. Then they're going to fill out their user details. And this is really where the magic happens. So once we're at this point, the user is going to hit the desktop, and within about a second, depnotify is loaded. It's just that simple. And from here on out, the regular enrollment is going to take over. It's really about shortening that time from when the user hits the desktop to when depnotify is loaded, or whatever splash screen you're using, just to ensure that the user's aware that something is still happening. In some cases, when they hit the desktop, they're like, is there anything else meant to be happening? With you as the admin know that something else is going to be occurring. It's just there's a bit of a lag. It could be, could just be taking time for the network to get those packages down onto the machine before depnotify starts running. So we've talked about the default state, desired state, run you through that. Now let's chat about the implementation and how we put everything together. So this is the contents of the PreStage package and how I deploy it to my clients. It contains two regular packages. The first contains depnotify and all the associated scripts and LaunchDaemons. And the second is a collection of logos and assets that we use. Now, you could easily have all of this in just one component package, which is then built into the distribution package. But in my case, sometimes if we add new assets to this, what I like to do is then just package up just that asset package by itself and deploy it out to older Macs so that all the devices on my fleet have the same set of assets and logos. The final part is this distbuild script. So I just call it this because it's building a distribution package. And this is what ties everything together. So let's dig into that. So the distbuild script first builds the two component packages, and then it'll combine them into a single distribution package. Now at each stage of this, I sign these packages with our developer ID installer certificate. You don't necessarily have to do that for the two component packages, but it is a hard requirement that you do it for the one that wraps everything else, the distribution package. If you want to build just one of the component packages by themselves, I just use the build scripts that I've got in each of the root folders of those individual packages. I find every time I create a new custom package, when I'm not using something like auto package, I'll take this individual build script that I use, drop it into that repo, and then it's a really easy way to make sure that I'm building those packages that it's not necessarily worth writing an auto package recipe for, but I know that they're then created in a consistent manner. So next up is what happens in the distbuild script is just notarizing and stapling the package. This is something new that I've started doing, but now that I've got a fairly automated way of doing it, makes things nice and easy. The XC run tool requires a username and password for a dev account to be passed to the command. Now, this account doesn't work with 2FA, so I'm storing the password in the keychain and extracting it with a security command. And I got this from a post on the Scripting OS X blog by Armin. So thanks, mate. I then read the UUID for this notarization instance so that I can check on the progress. The final and most annoying part is just simply checking every 30 seconds to see if the notarization has completed. Once it has, I'm then grabbing that ticket and stapling it to the package, ready for upload. So a lot of what I've done inside the package is based on the work that Eric Dreyer did in this particular repo. His version is a single script that is meant to be run as a post-install script from a package as part of a PreStage package, and it cats out the individual files. So it's just one script that then cats everything out. I think, look, that's one way to do it. I prefer to have everything split out into their individual files, and because I'm already putting depnotify onto the device, I find that it just makes things easier for me to manage. The individual components of that package now that we're using, we've just got the stock standard LaunchDaemon. It simply launches the Prestarter script that was deployed as part of the package, and it just does that as soon as it's loaded. Now, as part of the install, I put some default text into the depnotify log for the first launch. And so this is before Jamf is on the Mac, and it's overwritten once the rest of the enrollment flow takes over. Onto the Prestarter script. The rest of it is really just a few bits and pieces before we run the depnotify-Starter script to kick off the rest of our enrollment. So this section of code is simply waiting for the setup assistant to finish. We're running a loop for the Finder process to become active. And then now that the Finder is active, we're going to grab the current user and then we're going to launch depnotify with that placeholder text and look for the Jamf log to appear. A lot of those sections of code are from other bits and pieces from the depnotify-Starter script or other bits of ARIC or other bits and pieces. I'm just rearranging them to make it a more effective way of launching depnotify as quickly as possible. The final part of the Prestarter script is watching the Jamf log now that the binary is installed, and once the enrollment complete trigger shows, I write the time into a management plist for calculating the enrollment length. Once that's done, I kick off the custom trigger that's set up for the depnotify-Starter script. If you're using your own method of running policies in depnotify, you can ignore this section, but if you are using it and you want to ensure that everything runs smoothly as part of the depnotify-Starter script from Jamf, you'll have to make a few modifications just so that depnotify continues seamlessly from the instance that's launched from the LaunchDaemon Prestarter script as part of the PreStage enrollment. So the default behavior of the starter script is to remove the depnotify log when testing mode is enabled. So you can do kind of rapid iteration, but as we're already putting that log onto the device before this script runs, we don't want to remove it. If you do remove it, if you do remove it while depnotify is running, the app won't pick up any changes in the new file. The usual behavior of the script is to quit any instance of depnotify that was running prior to the script. Now, I don't like to do this because I find it very distracting for depnotify to quit. You have a brief second or two, and then it relaunches a second later. I also comment out this section as we don't want the script, that's the depnotify-Starter script, to error out when there are already kind of bomb files and log files present on the device. We've put those files there on purpose. And finally, we don't need depnotify to launch. We launched it already as part of the Prestarter script, as part of that PreStage enrollment. So really, at the end of the day, how do we get this running? Well, you clone the repo. I'm going to have a link to that at the end of this. Throw in a few details, things like the name of your developer ID certificate. If you want to name things slightly differently, we're going to build that package, and then we're going to comment out some sections of the depnotify-Starter script. Now, you don't necessarily need to use the depnotify-Starter script. I'm using it currently because it's a holdover from before I started at the bank, and it was easier just to modify it to suit this particular usage. In the future, I'm likely going to rip out a whole bunch of other sections because I don't use a lot of the features that are baked into that particular script. It's meant as a kind of kitchen sink tool. It's great. It makes it really easy to get started and running, but in my case, I don't need all those bells and whistles, so I'll likely rip that out. But for those of you who are using that and want to adopt this pre-starter method so that depnotify launches as quick as possible, this is a way that you can accomplish that with minimal effort. So thanks very much for sitting through this. Here's a link to where you can find it. If I've made any stupid errors, please let me know. Thank you very much.